Hello, my friend, and welcome. Tonight, I invite you to settle in and listen to a whispered tale from a dark and distant land, Wallachia, a place of deep forests, ancient castles, and midnight whispers awaits us. In this gentle narrative, we will walk the moonlit paths of legend, exploring a story of love and loss, of war and courage, drawn from the lore of Castlevania. Make yourself comfortable. Feel the calm of the night around you. Let my soft voice guide you through shadows and starlight as we begin. Our journey will be calm and careful, touching on bittersweet memories and heroic destinies, all in a tone as light as a feather. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine flickering candlelight dancing on stone walls. Hear the distant hush of the wind over lonely hills. In this safe, quiet space, the only thing you need to do is listen and drift. We'll begin our tale at the very heart of things with a love that burned bright against the darkness. So breathe deeply, relax, and let the story unfold in a gentle whisper. A love that defied the darkness. Long ago in Wallachia, under the pale silver of the moon, a most unlikely love took root. Dracula, yes, the immortal vampire prince himself, lived in solitude, steeped in knowledge and shadow. One fateful night in the year 1455, a brave young woman named Lisa knocked at the door of his castle. She was a healer, a scholar of medicine, and she sought the knowledge hidden in the vampire's library to help her people. Dracula was used to being feared, but Lisa did not tremble. Instead, she gazed up at the towering, pale figure in the doorway. With kindness and determination, her courage intrigued the ancient vampire. In his lonely halls, filled with books and secrets, no human had ever dared to come so far. Moved by Lisa's boldness and her sincere desire to learn, Dracula agreed to teach her his scientific wisdom. In return, Lisa offered the one thing Dracula had denied himself for centuries, a chance to reconnect with humanity, to see the world through human eyes once more. And so, in candlelit laboratories and quiet garden walks, the vampire lord and the village doctor grew close. They discussed remedies and stars, history and dreams. Dracula's centuries of knowledge met Lisa's compassion and fearless curiosity. In time, the unlikely teacher and student became husband and wife. In each other, they found a joy neither had known. Lisa's gentle influence even softened Dracula's heart, teaching him to see humans not as prey, but as people with hopes and struggles. The villagers of Wallachia saw smoke from the chimney of Lisa's little cottage, unaware that its humble warmth was shared by a vampire who had rediscovered love. For 2 decades, Dracula and Lisa lived quietly in their home by the town of Targoviste, cherishing simple days that glowed with happiness. They had a son, Adrian, who would later be known as Alucard, a bright and thoughtful child of night and light. In their private world, the Dark Lord of Wallachia became a devoted husband and father. Lisa's influence was a beacon in Dracula's long, dark life, a love that truly defied the darkness within him. But the world outside could not leave such goodness untouched. In the year 1475, while Dracula was away traveling at Lisa's, urging to learn more of the world, tragedy struck. The church in Targoviste, led by a zealous bishop, discovered Lisa's scientific equipment and medicinal herbs in her home. They didn't understand her healing work. To their ignorant eyes, her medicines looked like witchcraft. Instead of honoring her as a doctor, they condemned her as a witch. On a grim day, under a sunless sky, Lisa was taken by the authorities. Despite her pleas, and the fact that all she ever tried to do was help others, she was tied to a wooden stake in the town square. The flames were lit. Smoke and sorrow filled the air. Lisa, with her final breath, begged the watching crowd to not hate Dracula or take revenge on them, for her heart knew only love and forgiveness. Then she was gone, consumed by fire and cruelty. When Dracula returned home that evening, he found only ashes and silence where once there had been laughter. A grieving neighbor tearfully told him what had happened. The love of his life, the woman who had brought light into his world, was murdered by the very people she had sought to heal. In that moment, something in Dracula cracked. The pain and rage of loss overwhelmed him. In a storm of grief, Dracula did something he had never done before. He let his fury and sorrow explode in a vow of vengeance. Rearing up in terrifying glory, he appeared in the skies over Targovista as a towering image of fire and shadow. His voice, usually so soft with Lisa, now boomed with wrath. He condemned the bishop and the town for their crime and declared that the people of Wallachia had 1 year to make their peace with God. 1 year, and then he would return to annihilate every last human in the land as punishment for Lisa's death. Many who heard Dracula's promise that day thought it a mere demon's trick or a moment of madness, but some felt a chill, understanding that the grieving husband's warning was very real. In the ruined cottage, Dracula's son, Adrian, who loved both his mother and father, pleaded with his father not to punish everyone for the actions of a few. Adrian pleaded with his father to seek out only the man responsible for Lisa's death, instead of condemning all of humanity. But Dracula, blinded by tears of blood, would not listen. In a swirl of cape and lightning, he struck his own son down in anger. Adrian barely survived the encounter, and Dracula departed to brood and gather his strength for the doom he would unleash in 1 year's time. Thus, a love that had tamed a legendary darkness ended in unspeakable tragedy. Dracula and Lisa's story should have been one of hope, a vampire finding his humanity through the woman he adored. Instead, it became the spark that ignited a terrible war. As the year of warning ticked away, the people of Wallachia could only wait, fearful and uncertain, not realizing the storm that was coming. Yet even in the wake of this tragedy, whispers of Lisa's goodness and Dracula's grief spread quietly. Some said that if a love as powerful as theirs could not soften the world's cruelty, then dark times were truly ahead. It is with a heavy heart and a gentle tone that we leave this chapter, carrying the memory of Lisa's kindness like a lantern into the oncoming night. The War of Night and Fire. 1 year passed since Lisa's death, and the sun set on the final day of Dracula's mercy. True to his word, the vampire lord returned to Targoviste on the anniversary of her execution, and he brought hell itself with him. The hour of retribution had arrived. In the town's grand church, the very bishop who ordered Lisa's death gathered with an archbishop and nobles holding a blasphemous celebration. They laughed and boasted that Dracula had not made good on his threat, believing themselves safe. But as midnight approached, the skies above Targoviste burned red. A colossal visage of Dracula formed out of storm clouds and flames, looking down upon the city that had murdered his wife. In a voice that made the earth tremble, Dracula pronounced their sentence. Fire rained from the heavens. From that inferno emerged night creatures, dark, twisted demons from another world, called forth by Dracula's unholy magic. They swept through Targoviste like a plague of nightmares. The archbishop who had mocked Dracula's warning was the first to die. The vampiric hordes descended right into the cathedral and snuffed out his life in an instant. The corrupt bishop who led Lisa to the stake found no protection in his church. A demon snarled that God had abandoned him and ended his life amid the stained glass and candlelight. The heart of Wallachia's faith was left in ruins, defiled by the very darkness its leaders had provoked. As Dracula's legion poured into the streets, panic screams rose into the night. Homes and fields burned, innocents fled or were cut down as the ravenous night creatures spread across the land. Dracula did not lead them on the ground. Heartbroken and cold, he watched from afar as his vengeance unfolded. There was no joy in his face, only emptiness, as if all that made him once feel alive had died with Lisa. This war on humanity was a grim duty to him, the fulfillment of a promise written in grief and blood. Night after night, the assault continued. Town after town fell silent under the onslaught of demons. Fires dotted the horizon wherever you looked, and the once peaceful countryside became a hunting ground for creatures of the night. Many people, in their terror, looked for someone to blame for this calamity. Whispers in taverns and refugee camps muttered that perhaps the noble houses of Wallachia had angered Dracula. In particular, suspicion fell on the old family of monster hunters, the Belmonts. For generations, House Belmont had protected the land from supernatural evils, wielding enchanted whips and holy knowledge to slay creatures like Dracula. But the church, ironically, had excommunicated and shunned them long ago, mistrusting their arcane ways. Now, as Dracula's curse ravaged Wallachia, superstitious folk claimed the Belmonts must have brought this terror upon them somehow. They whispered that God had punished Wallachia because it had harbored a family of demon hunters. In truth, the Belmonts might have been the only ones who knew how to fight back, but they were nowhere to be found when darkness fell. So the common people suffered, leaderless and afraid. Each sundown, they huddled behind walls and prayed for dawn as leathery wings and piercing shrieks filled the skies. In the eerie glow of burning villages, shadows danced with unspeakable shapes. It seemed as if the night itself had come alive with hatred, and above it all, Dracula's grief hung like a storm cloud, fueling the ceaseless rage of his armies. Yet, even in those bleak times, small candles of hope remained lit. Quiet heroes, unsung and scattered, were still out in the world. A humble scholar here, a brave warrior there, people who refused to let humanity's light be extinguished. Trevor Belmont, the last son of the Belmont clan, was one such soul, wandering the roads alone, and in hidden corners, a mysterious tribe of nomads known as the Speakers carried with them ancient wisdom and perhaps a few miracles. Their paths were all about to converge, even as the war of night and fire continued to consume Wallachia. As we draw this chapter to a close, take a moment to breathe. The images of burning towns and weeping skies are intense, but remember, this is a story told softly, and you are safe here listening. The darkest nights give way to dawn, and in the next part of our tale, we will find those who dare to stand against the darkness. Let us continue in a calm and gentle voice to the story of a wandering hero and a scholar of magic who joined forces beneath the crying heavens. The Last Belmont and the Scholar, Amid the chaos, as monsters roamed and villagers clutched rosaries under their beds, a lone figure trudged down a muddy road. He wore a threadbare cloak and carried a well-worn whip coiled at his side. This was Trevor Belmont, last heir of the Belmont family of monster hunters. Once his family's name was spoken with admiration, protectors of humanity, bane of Dracula's kind, but years of persecution had reduced Trevor to a cynical drifter. When we find him, he is tired, hungry, and more familiar with the bottom of an ale mug than the weight of destiny on his shoulders. Trevor wandered into the city of Gothic, a place beleaguered by nightly attacks from Dracula's creatures. Its people were desperate and on edge, ready to blame anyone for their plight. As Trevor sought a bite of food and a bit of information, he overheard angry whispers in the tavern. The townsfolk believed that a group of traveling scholars, the speakers, had brought Dracula's wrath upon Grayson. The speakers were a nomadic people who carried stories, knowledge, and the old ways of magic. Suspicious minds accused them of witchcraft, thinking that if they drove the speakers away or killed them, the monsters might leave too. Though Trevor had little interest in Hero's work by then, something tugged at his conscience. The Belmont blood in him, perhaps, or a remembered lesson from childhood. When he saw a pair of frightened speaker elders cornered by hostile priests in an alley, Trevor stepped in. With a few cracks of his whip and a well-placed punch or two, he sent the clergyman running. The speakers, grateful and dignified even in danger, welcomed Trevor among them. In their hidden refuge, an old man called simply the Speaker Elder explained their purpose. They were in Gothic to help, to care for the sick and injured, hiding in the city. They believed in facing the evil with knowledge and compassion, not running from it. Trevor urged the elder to take his people and flee the city. He knew firsthand how stubborn and violent frightened humans could be. But the elder refused. One of their own was still missing, his beloved granddaughter, Sypha Belnades. Sypha, a brave speaker magician, had gone into the catacombs under Grayson on a quest. She was searching for the sleeping soldier, a legendary hero said to slumber beneath the earth, who might awaken to save them from Dracula. Sypha had not returned. Despite Trevor's gruff exterior, he would not leave an innocent to die. Begrudgingly, he agreed to find the speaker's lost grandchild, venturing alone into the deep, dark tunnels below the city. With only torches and memories of Belmont lore to guide him, Trevor navigated the labyrinth under Gothic. The passages were strangely carved, as if by some ancient design, and they reminded him of descriptions he'd read of Dracula's own castle mechanisms. Deeper in, he discovered statues and traps, proof that something powerful indeed lay hidden here. Eventually, in a chamber lit by eerie light, Trevor found what he sought, a stone statue of a young woman, a look of determination etched on her face. It was Sypha, petrified by dark magic. Guarding her was a hulking cyclops, a one-eyed beast whose gaze could turn any creature to stone. A fierce but quick battle followed. Trevor was out of practice, but he was still a Belmont. Ducking under the monster's heavy swings, he struck with his whip, blinded its single eye, and finally plunged a dagger into the beast's throat. The cyclops collapsed, and as it died, the petrification curse broke. The stone figure of Sypha softened back into warm flesh and blood. She gasped for air and found herself in the arms of a stranger, rough around the edges, but with a reassuring grin. Trevor had saved her life, and in doing so, rekindled a spark of purpose within his own. Sypha Belnades was no ordinary traveler. She was young, with bright, curious eyes, and she carried the gift of elemental magic in her fingertips. Once back above ground, reunited with her overjoyed grandfather, Sypha revealed that her quest had indeed found something. The sleeping soldier was real, and he was hidden in those catacombs, awaiting those who would join him. Trevor, skeptical of legends, wasn't sure what to make of this, but any hope was better than none, and Sypha insisted that they needed to find this mysterious warrior. Before they could act, however, danger came from the living, not the dead. The Bishop of Gressid, the very man whose fanatic orders had led to Lisa's murder years ago, discovered the speaker's presence. Furious and fearful, he rallied a mob to eradicate them at sunset, thinking their blood would somehow appease Dracula. Trevor, knowing the speakers were innocent, took charge. He hid the elder and the speaker families in the underground chamber where Sypha had been imprisoned. Then, standing alone in the dusty town square, Trevor confronted the bishop's priests. As nightfall approached, with deft skill, the last Belmont battled the church hounds, twisting their weapons out of their hands and using his whip with non-lethal precision. The mob was dispersed, but as Trevor caught his breath, a new terror arrived. The sky had gone black. It was night, and with night came Dracula's horde. Demons tore into Gressid, and chaos erupted. Amidst the panic, Trevor stood his ground, to the astonishment of the townsfolk who had scorned him moments before. This vagabond Belmont became their champion. Sypha, refusing to stay hidden, joined the fray, her magic igniting the air with crackling flames to fend off the night creatures. In those desperate minutes, the people of Gressid saw the truth. The speakers in Belmont were not the cause of their woes, but their only hope of survival. Trevor even saved the corrupt bishop from a demon, only for that wretched man to meet poetic justice. A demon found him cowering in the church and snarled that his faith had faltered before ending his life. Thus, the instigator of Lisa's death met his end on the very altar where he had condemned her. Side by side, Trevor and Sypha pushed back the night's attackers, defending Gressid with whip and flame. As the last creature fell, an uneasy calm returned, but the battle had shaken the earth itself. With a mighty rumble, the stone floor of the town square gave way, collapsing from the damage and the hidden hollow spaces beneath. Trevor and Sypha tumbled down with the debris, deeper and deeper into the labyrinth below. When the dust settled, they found themselves in a part of the underground that even Sypha hadn't seen. Torches flickered to life, seemingly on their own, revealing an ancient chamber that felt more like a shrine. And there, at the chamber's center, floated a coffin illuminated by a gentle spell. The lid slid open, and a figure rose slowly from within. The sleeping soldier had awakened. He was a tall young man with blonde hair and eyes full of centuries. Though youthful in face, there was an aura of old soul sadness about him. He introduced himself with a quiet, refined voice. Adrian Tepes, though he is better known as Alucard. Trevor instantly sensed something unnerving. This man was a Dhampir, half human and half vampire, and not just any vampire, but Dracula's own son. This was the child born of Dracula and Lisa's love, now grown and resolved to make right what had gone wrong. Alucard had been gravely wounded a year ago when he tried to stop his father's rage. and he placed himself into enchanted sleep to heal. The speaker's prophecy of a sleeping soldier was in fact born of magic and foresight, a message sent through time that one day a Belmont and a scholar would seek him out. And so here they were, Trevor Belmont, Sypha the speaker, and Alucard, son of Dracula, meeting under the city in humanity's darkest hour. At first, distrust flared. Trevor, protective of Sypha and reeling from battle, challenged Alucard. The two even traded blows, a whirlwind duel in the bowels of the earth, whip cracking and sword flashing. But Sypha's calm voice and Alucard's restraint soon brought the skirmish to a halt. Alucard only needed to be sure that these two were truly resolved to fight Dracula as he was. Satisfied that Trevor's gruff bravery and Sypha's determined kindness were genuine, Alucard bowed his head. He would join forces with them. The three heroes swore to each other that they would find a way to stop Dracula's war, not with hatred, but with a hope to save the world, and perhaps to save Dracula's soul as well. In that moment, beneath the ruins of Gresset, a spark of light was kindled in the endless night. A legendary alliance was formed. The last Belmont, the scholarly speaker-magician, and the grieving son of Dracula united for the first time in history. They climbed out of the catacombs into a dawn where the sun broke red over the horizon. Tired villagers looked at them with a mix of awe and confusion. Trevor Belmont, once reviled, was now their savior. Sypha Belnades, the witch they wanted to banish, had conjured flames on their behalf. And Alucard, a vampire's son, stood guard among them, a silent guardian with golden eyes that held a promise. Humanity would not face the coming darkness alone. Take a slow breath now as we pause our tale for a moment. Our three heroes have found each other. Their path will be long and hard, but together they carry the legacy of love, knowledge, and courage. In the gentle quiet of this retelling, imagine the relief and resolve in their hearts as they set forth. Next, we will follow Alucard, the son of the dragon, as he grapples with his fate and leads his new friends toward the final confrontation with his own father. Let us continue calmly and softly into the next chapter of our whispering lore. Son of the dragon, Alucard, born Adrian Tepes, carries a name chosen to signify that he stands opposite to Dracula, and indeed, he strives to be everything his father is not. He is the Dampier son of the dragon, a being of both night and day. As the small band of heroes journeyed toward their destiny, Alucard often walked ahead a little, alone with his thoughts. Imagine him moving with graceful silence through a moonlit forest, cape gently brushing fallen leaves, the others following a short distance behind to give him space. In those quiet moments, Alucard's heart was heavy with conflicted feelings. He remembered his childhood in the warm glow of Lisa's love, the laughter in their cottage, the lessons in science and compassion his mother taught him, the way his father's stern face would soften when they played with little wooden toys. Those days felt like a dream now. Ever since his mother's cruel death, Alucard had lived with a sorrow deeper than the ocean. He understood why Dracula suffered. He too had lost the person dearest to him. But whereas Dracula's grief turned to rage, Alucard's had turned into determination. He would do anything to honor Lisa's memory, and that meant stopping his father from committing unforgivable genocide. Lisa had always urged them both to help people, to use knowledge and power for good. Alucard intended to keep that promise, even if it meant facing Dracula in battle. In truth, Alucard had already tried once. On that terrible night when Dracula declared war, Adrian confronted his father in a desperate attempt to change his mind. The clash between them was brief and heartbreakingly one-sided. Dracula, consumed by wrath, struck his son down without a second thought, nearly killing him. He then left Alucard bleeding on the castle floor as he departed to summon his army. It was only Dracula's lingering love, some subconscious unwillingness to finish off his own child, that spared Alucard's life. Badly wounded, Alucard had no choice but to retreat and recover. The year of war that followed raged on without him. This guilt haunted the young Dhampir. While the world suffered, he had been unable to fight. But now, beside Trevor and Sypha, he had a second chance to make things right. The journey took them to the ruins of Castle Belmont, Trevor's ancestral home, because knowledge would be their greatest weapon. Under the rubble of a burnt mansion lay the Belmont Hold, a secret vault containing centuries of monster hunting lore. Down winding stairs lit by Sypha's magic, they entered a massive underground library. Alucard's vampire senses picked up traces of holy water, aged leather, and even the faint echoes of dangerous old magic sealed in relics on the shelves. Here, Trevor found an arsenal of weapons, knives of silver, vials of alchemical fire, and most precious of all, a flail known as the Morning Star, a deadly whip infused with divine power. Sypha pored over ancient books, seeking any spell or clue that might help lock or destroy Dracula's moving castle. Alucard wandered the library's halls quietly, occasionally stopping to regard the preserved remains of creatures his father had sired and Belmonts had slain. It was sobering to see how many attempts had been made over generations to kill Dracula and creatures like him, and now it fell to Alucard to do what none of those Belmonts alone could accomplish. Outside, Dracula's forces were on the move. Through an enchanted mirror, the trio spied on Dracula's war council. They saw that Dracula had gathered vampire generals from across the globe in his castle, yet he entrusted the command of his armies to two human forge masters, Hector and Isaac, skilled necromancers who could create demons from corpses. This was highly unusual. Many of Dracula's vampire lieutenants, like the brash Viking known as Godbrand, resented taking orders from humans. Tensions at Dracula's castle ran high. Through whispered discussions, Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard learned that one of the council members, a sharp-tongued vampire lady named Carmilla, openly questioned Dracula's decisions. She even dared to ask why Dracula had not turned Lisa into a vampire to grant her immortality, a cruel, prying question that struck a nerve. It became clear that Dracula's grief-laden war was being poorly managed. His overwhelming despair meant he cared only that all humans die, not how it was done. His single-mindedness was causing fractures among his followers. With Sypha's clever planning, the heroes decided to strike during this discord. Using the knowledge from the Belmont Library, Sypha devised a spell to anchor Dracula's castle in place, for the castle had magic that let it teleport across the land, making it nearly impossible to assault. The plan was risky. They would make the castle reappear at a place of their choosing and then storm it. Time was running short as Carmilla was scheming to lure Dracula's forces into a trap at a place called Bryla, which could lead to even greater bloodshed. the trio hurried to execute their plan. On a thunderous day, under swirling black clouds, Sypha completed her incantation. With a crack of energy, Dracula's titanic castle materialized, gears grinding and towers looming at the threshold of the Belmont estate. The final battle was at hand. Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard steeled themselves and entered the Devil's Lair together. Inside, they found devastation and chaos. Carmilla had indeed sprung her trap. Part of the castle's vampire army had been led to a river and destroyed in holy water, and now Carmilla's own troops invaded to overthrow Dracula. The Great Hall was a battleground, vampires slashing at each other, night creatures rampaging without orders. Amid this turmoil, our trio cut through and made their way toward Dracula's study, where they suspected he would be. The castle quaked as Sypha's magic tried to keep it anchored. In one corridor, a familiar face intervened. Isaac, the loyal forge master, barred their way with a horde of demons at his back. But before a fight could erupt, Dracula himself, perhaps sensing Alucard's approach, did something unexpected. He used his magic to teleport Isaac far away to safety. In what might have been a moment of genuine care, Dracula couldn't bear the thought of his one loyal human friend dying in the crossfire. So Isaac vanished, and Dracula waited alone for his son and the intruders. In the place he felt most connected to Lisa, their old family home within the castle, Alucard led Trevor and Sypha into that final chamber, and there he was, Dracula, Lord of Vampires, standing before a large window with the red sky swirling behind him. The room was ironically peaceful. It was filled with little mementos of a life once happy. Children's drawings, wooden toys, books of art and science. This was the very room Lisa had made into Adrian's nursery long ago. Alucard's heart clenched at the sight. Dracula turned slowly to face them, his eyes hollow. In a low voice, he acknowledged his son, and so the confrontation began. Trevor and Sypha stood at Alucard's side. Words were exchanged quietly at first. Alucard implored his father to stop this madness, saying it's not what Mother would have wanted. Dracula, in a voice heavy with centuries of sorrow, replied that nothing mattered anymore except fulfilling his vengeance in Lisa's name. The time for talk passed like a sigh. In a blink, the battle was joined. Dracula moved faster than any human could see, engaging Alucard with a flurry of strikes. The Dhampir parried with his sword as best he could, but his father's strength was overwhelming. Trevor's whip snapped out, wrapping around Dracula's arm to pull him back, but the vampire lord swatted Trevor aside like an insect, sending the Belmont crashing into a wall. Sypha conjured burning chains of fire that wrapped around Dracula's form, and for a moment it seemed she had contained him. But with a roar, he shattered the bindings and knocked Sypha unconscious with a careless backhand. This was no ordinary foe. Dracula was perhaps the most powerful being on earth. He withstood the full force of the Morning Star whip, the blast of Sypha's flames, and the thrust of Alucard's sword all together. The castle shook with the force of their conflict. Stained glass windows exploded from stray magic, and ancient banners turned to cinders. Still, the three heroes pressed on, refusing to yield. Dracula conjured a massive orb of searing fire, intent on consuming them all, but Sypha and Trevor combined their powers, fire and whip, to deflect it, blowing a hole through the castle wall in the process. The blast hurled Dracula and Alucard through several chambers. Separated from Trevor and Sypha, father and son crashed into another familiar space, Alucard's childhood room, the very one they had been fighting in already, reduced now to rubble and debris. In the wreckage, Alucard lay sprawled, wounded and exhausted, while Dracula loomed over him, intent on finishing the battle. As Dracula moved to strike his son, something gave him pause. His red eyes fell upon fragments of a painting of Lisa that had been knocked to the floor. He saw the broken crib, the scattered toys, the charred remains of memories. Suddenly, it was as if the haze of hatred lifted from his mind for the first time in years. Dracula looked at Alucard, truly looked at him, his boy, beaten and bloodied at his feet, defending humanity, just as Lisa would have. Horror and sorrow flooded Dracula's face. He realized that in seeking to destroy the world, he had also been destroying the last precious thing Lisa had left him, their son, and the realization shattered him. The mighty Dracula, who had seemed invincible a moment before, now trembled. Tears of blood welled in his eyes. In that humanizing instant, all his rage fell away to reveal unfathomable grief. He understood that he was killing the person Lisa loved most, and that he had become what she would have hated. Alucard watched as his father's ferocious stance slackened, as Dracula slumped to his knees, overcome. The Dark Lord closed his eyes and waited, ready to embrace death if it would reunite him with Lisa. With a shaking hand and tears on his cheeks, Alucard picked up a wooden stake from the ruins of his bed. Apologizing softly, he drove the stake through Dracula's heart. Dracula gasped, more in sorrow than pain, and crumpled further. In that final moment, Trevor and Sypha arrived, rushing into the room. Understanding what had to be done, Trevor swung his ancestor's longsword in a clean arc, and in one stroke he took Dracula's head from his shoulders. Sypha then summoned cleansing fire that roared through the chamber, consuming Dracula's remains in a black inferno. The raging flames died down to embers, and at last silence fell. Vlad Dracula Tepes was no more. All that remained of him was ash drifting in the cold breeze, and a simple gold wedding ring that clinked to the floor. Alucard knelt and picked up the ring, the symbol of his parents' love, now a bittersweet token of victory. Sypha, bruised but awake, placed a gentle hand on Alucard's shoulder. Trevor, ever pragmatic, glanced around to ensure no other threats lurked, then let out a long exhale. It was over. The dragon had been slain, not by a hero's holy strength alone, but by the memory of love. Alucard's face crumpled, and he wept, quiet, heartbroken sobs echoing in the destroyed nursery. In killing his father, he felt he had lost his mother all over again. Trevor and Sypha gave him a moment, respectfully silent in the presence of such grief. They understood that while the world would rejoice at Dracula's demise, for Alucard it was an agonizing personal tragedy. Gently, Sypha told Alucard that his mother would be proud of him, that he had saved countless lives this night. Trevor, in a rare tender gesture, offered Alucard the Belmont family library and home as a place to keep safe, suggesting that perhaps together the Belmont and Tepes legacies could guard humanity's knowledge. Alucard accepted with a faint, grateful nod, recognizing this as a meaningful trust. As dawn's light finally broke through the dissipating storm clouds, our trio emerged from Dracula's castle. The great citadel, now devoid of its master, stood still, Its war had ended with a quiet finality. Birds began to sing tentative songs in the distance, heralding a new morning for Wallachia, one without Dracula's shadow looming overhead. In the aftermath, Sypha decided she would not return to the speaker life just yet, and Trevor found he did not want to part from her company. They had grown close, two lonely souls who discovered laughter and love amidst the fighting. They resolved to travel together, to help the land recover from its nightmares, and to have their own adventures righting smaller wrongs. With heartfelt farewells, Trevor and Sypha left Alucard at the now empty castle. The son of Dracula stood on the threshold of his father's great hall, watching his friends depart until they were specks on the horizon, hand in hand. Then he was alone. The victory was real, but its cost was sorrow. Alucard spent that first day wandering the silent corridors of the castle, ending in the study where so many happy and tragic memories lived. Surrounded by his father's books and his mother's touch in the decor, he let himself cry, a release of all the pain and loneliness inside him. The castle seemed to mourn with him, its emptiness a testament to what had been lost. And yet, through the tears, there was a glimmer of hope. Lisa's wish for Dracula to rediscover his humanity had, in a roundabout way, come true at the end. Dracula had remembered love in his final moments. Now, dear listener, the story might have ended here, but our whispering lore has more to tell. Darkness does not vanish so easily, and the world left behind after Dracula's fall still trembled with aftershocks of his reign. In the next part, we shall see how new evils rose from the ashes and how our heroes and even former villains found new purpose. Keep your eyes closed, continue to breathe deeply, and let us continue our journey in a soft voice to the court of blood and chains. Dracula's death was not the end of the dark times. In some ways, it was the beginning of another chapter of turmoil. With the dragon gone, a power vacuum opened in the night. Many vampires who survived the war saw an opportunity to grab territory and authority. Chief among them was Carmilla, the calculating mistress who had plotted against Dracula from within his own war council. Carmilla was a vision of cold beauty and colder ambition. She believed the old vampire lords had been weak or mad, Dracula included, and that she could carve out a new empire from the remnants of his kingdom. Castlevania.fandom.com. Even before Dracula's ashes had cooled, Carmilla seized her chance. During the chaos of the castle battle, she managed to seduce one of Dracula's forge masters, Hector, into following her schemes. Hector was a gentle-hearted but naive young man, a human with the grim power to reanimate the dead into demonic servants. He had hoped to end the war mercifully by culling humans rather than outright extermination. But in Dracula's court, he was easily manipulated, and Carmilla saw him as the perfect tool. When Dracula fell, Carmilla captured Hector and dragged him back in chains to her homeland of Styria, far to the north. Styria became the seat of a new council of sisters, a quartet of vampire women with Carmilla at its head. There was Lenore, the soft-spoken diplomat with a steel will behind her polite smiles. Striga, the towering warrior general, as fierce on the battlefield as the night is long. And Marana, the strategist, weaving logistics and supply lines like a spider's web. Together, these four plotted a grand and terrible design. Carmilla wanted to fill the void Dracula left, but not by killing all humans, rather By enslaving them, she imagined a future where the vampires ruled openly and humanity was corralled like livestock, kept alive only to feed their predators. To achieve this, they needed an army, and for an army, they needed Hector's forging abilities. But Hector, heartbroken by Dracula's end and feeling betrayed by Carmilla's lies, was not eager to serve another tyrant. Thus, Carmilla tasked Lenore, the deceptively sweet negotiator, with a mission: tame Hector. Lenore approached Hector in his cell with kindness and understanding, tending to his injuries, giving him blankets and books. Over weeks, she earned a flicker of trust from the lonely forge master. Eventually, she offered him what he longed for: companionship, perhaps even affection. In a moonlit courtyard, she embraced him with gentle words and slipped a magical ring onto his finger. In that instant, Hector was bound body and soul to Lenore's will. The enchanted ring enslaved him. Whatever she commanded, he had to obey. Thus, Hector was chained not just by iron, but by a curse of love and servitude. The Council of Sisters now had their forge. Meanwhile, the other forge master, Isaac, had survived his forced teleportation by Dracula and found himself alone in a distant desert. Isaac was a very different man from Hector. Where Hector had compassion, Isaac had rage. He had been utterly loyal to Dracula, revering him almost as a god, because he too hated the cruelty of mankind. When Dracula died, Isaac's grief and anger were incandescent. Stranded far from Wallachia, he began a long journey of blood. Step by step, Isaac slew any hostile humans he met and resurrected them as night creatures to build a personal army. In dusty villages and oases, rumors spread of a scarred man with a jeweled dagger and an entourage of demons moving with purpose. Isaac aimed to find Hector, whom he believed betrayed Dracula, and kill Carmilla, whom he knew had turned on their master. His was a dark pilgrimage of vengeance, yet not all encounters hardened Isaac's heart. During his travels, he met a mysterious blind woman and a sea captain, individuals who spoke to him not with fear or hatred, but with wisdom. One night on a ship under the stars, the captain asked Isaac what he would do after his revenge was complete. Isaac found he had no answer at first, beyond continuing Dracula's work. The captain gently challenged him. Why not use your skills to create rather than destroy? Could you not teach humanity to be better instead of wiping it out? These conversations planted seeds of doubt in Isaac's single-minded fury. Though he did not abandon his quest, he began to consider what life might hold after vengeance. A quiet, revolutionary thought. Back in Styria, Carmilla's plans accelerated. Through Hector's forced labor, night creatures were being forged in secret. However, not all her sisters were entirely on board. Striga and Marana, out expanding their territory at Carmilla's behest, witnessed firsthand the difficulties of ruling frightened human populations. One sunrise, after a brutal fight with desperate villagers who attacked their encampment, Striga turned to Marana and quietly expressed exhaustion. How many more years of blood would it take? If they succeeded in conquering an empire, would they ever know rest, or would they be forever putting down rebellions and planning wars? Both Striga and Marana realized that Carmilla's grand vision might doom them to an endless cycle of violence. Doubt gnawed at them as they contemplated the cost of ruling the world. Nonetheless, Carmilla pushed forward relentlessly, and soon enough, Isaac arrived on Styria's borders with his hellish legion. armed with a magic mirror given by a witch named Miranda and tactical knowledge gained from a deadly encounter in a cursed city. Isaac used Hector's own unfinished teleportation mirror to transport his army right into Carmilla's castle courtyard. The Battle of Styria erupted, a fierce clash of beasts and vampires. The castle's halls ran red with blood as night creatures overran Carmilla's soldiers. Lenore, sensing the invasion, tried to evacuate Hector. By now, oddly, she had grown fond of her pet forge master, perhaps even loved him in her own twisted way. She urged Hector to follow her to safety, but Hector had anticipated such a moment, using stones he had secretly enchanted around the castle and a bit of what freedom he had left. He created a barrier that trapped Lenore in his room, shielding her from the worst of the violence, but also preventing her from controlling him further. In a symbolic act of reclaiming his will, Hector took a knife and severed his own finger to remove Lenore's slave ring. He was free, though trembling with pain and unsure of what future that granted him. In Carmilla's throne room, the final confrontation raged. Isaac, wielding twin curved blades and fueled by righteous fury, battled Carmilla in a dance of death. Carmilla fought like a cornered tigress, her white armor stained with the ashes of slain night creatures. She screamed that everything she had done was for the glory of their kind, that she would not be ended by a mere human like Isaac. Of all things, Isaac's creatures swarmed, and Carmilla cut them down in droves, laughing in defiance even as wounds accumulated on her body. But even a vampire has limits, and Carmilla was gradually surrounded. Realizing defeat was inevitable and preferring death to submission, she made one final drastic choice. With a fearsome cry, Carmilla plunged her own sword through her heart. Her ancient blood, empowered by rage, erupted outward in a violent magical blast, obliterating the room. When the haze settled, Carmilla was gone. Only a charred smear on the stone floor remained where the proud vampire once stood. She had denied Isaac the kill, but also removed herself from the board entirely. The shock of Carmilla's demise was felt by her sisters, far afield, Striga and Morana. Those doubts having taken root, sensed in their blood that Carmilla was no more. Without a word, they abandoned the campaign and disappeared into the wilderness together, unwilling to waste unlives on a dream now broken. In the castle, Isaac stood amidst ruin, surrounded by the snarling remains of his demonic army. He had his victory, but at that moment he faced a choice. Hector emerged cautiously, expecting Isaac's wrath, for indeed Isaac had intended to kill his former comrade for betrayal. But seeing Hector pathetic and exhausted, and remembering the words of the captain about forging a new path, Isaac stayed his hand. Instead of an execution, there was an uneasy conversation. Two human men who had unleashed hell for the sake of vampires now looked at the wreckage and wondered what it was all for. They acknowledged that both of them had been used, Hector by Carmilla, Isaac by Dracula's single-minded hatred. In the end, Isaac chose a route of mercy and purpose. He allowed Hector to live, giving him a chance at a life beyond cages. Isaac himself decided to remain in Styria, not as a destroyer, but perhaps as a builder. The once loyal knight of Dracula mused about creating a city or a haven where night creatures could exist without simply being weapons. He had glimpsed the possibility that even those born in darkness could find meaning beyond death. And so Isaac, drenched in the blood of battles, began to wash that blood off his hands with humble tasks. He buried the dead, tended a garden, and let thoughts of hatred slip away with each passing sunrise. As for Hector, freed from his ring, and with Lenore alive but trapped by the magical barrier, he found no joy in revenge or escape. Lenore had been kind to him in her way, and when the dust settled, Isaac had no interest in harming her either. The diplomat vampire realized that with Carmilla gone and her sisters scattered, her life as she knew it was over. The next morning, as dawn's first light crept into her cell, Lenore and Hector shared a final bittersweet conversation. She confessed she could not live as a vampire under guard or as a trophy of war. With a calm smile and tears in her eyes, Lenore stepped out onto the balcony. The sun's rays touched her, and she disintegrated into motes of ash that drifted away on the breeze. Hector watched the love and torment of his captor vanish with the morning light. He kept the memory of her kindness and cruelty both, vowing to learn from it. In the days that followed, Hector helped Isaac as penance, two former enemies now quietly tending to a new peaceful chapter on the very land Carmilla had once intended for a kingdom. Thus, the court of blood and chains, Carmilla's ambition, and the council of sisters came to an end. What began in treachery ended in dust, but from that ending sprang new beginnings. Isaac's redemption, Hector's freedom, and a lesson that even those born in darkness can choose a different path. Take a moment to appreciate this turn of events. Our tale in Whispers has shown that not only heroes, but villains too, can find slivers of grace. The night is slowly giving way to dawn, and hope glimmers on the horizon of Wallachia. In the next chapter, we will return to our original heroes and see how they fare in the aftermath of Dracula's fall and Carmilla's defeat. What of Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard? What of the lingering shadows of Dracula's legacy? As we proceed, remain relaxed, letting the gentle voice carry you. The storm is past, but the clouds are parting now, revealing a sky of possibility. Onward we go to see the hope after the storm. Hope after the storm. The worst of the darkness had passed. Dracula was gone, and with him the nightly hordes finally began to thin. Carmilla's iron grip over Styria had shattered. Across Wallachia, the people emerged from the ruins of their villages, blinking in the sunlight like survivors of a long winter. There were losses to mourn and wounds to heal, but dawn had come. Alucard stood on the steps of Dracula's castle, now alone, except for the gentle presence of memory. For weeks after his father's death, he kept to himself in the great halls, rattling around among the ghosts of his past. Loneliness weighed heavily on his noble shoulders, as the castle was far too quiet, without the constant hum of Dracula's machinery or the voices of friends. In despair, Alucard even placed the impaled bodies of two humans who betrayed him at the castle's gates as a gruesome warning, mirroring his father's old tactics. But fate had more in store for him yet. One day, a horse arrived at the castle, carrying a dying messenger. The man bore a plea for help from a village called Dynasty, not far from the castle grounds. The village was under attack by stray night creatures that still prowled even after Dracula's end. Alucard had shut himself away, but he could not ignore innocents in danger. Stirring from his solitude, he took up his sword and set out to aid them, a spark of purpose kindling in his chest once more. At Dynasty, Alucard made a dramatic entrance, descending upon the attacking monsters like a golden-eyed savior. The villagers, terrified and awed by the pale swordsman, watched him dispatch the creatures with elegant, deadly efficiency. Among them was Greta, the head woman of Dynasty, a brave and practical leader of her people. Though cautious, Greta recognized that Alucard was fighting to protect them, not harm them. Once the night creatures were slain or driven off, she approached him. Far from recoiling, this strong-willed woman thanked Alucard, and assessing their dire circumstances, asked if he would help her people further. Their village was no longer safe. They needed sanctuary. Greta humbly requested Alucard's protection for the journey, and perhaps a shelter for her people. In that moment, Alucard felt Lisa's spirit move within him, the call to help, to be of service to humanity as his mother would have wanted. He agreed to guide the villagers to his castle, which could serve as a fortress against any evil that remained. Perhaps, he thought, the castle that once symbolized fear could become a beacon of hope. Thus, the Dhampir opened his home to a community of frightened, hopeful humans. As they arrived and settled in, Alucard found the silence replaced by sounds he hadn't heard in a long time. Children's laughter echoing in the halls, hammers repairing broken structures, and gentle prayers of thanks. The castle had become alive again, not with dark magic, but with human warmth. Alucard himself slowly thawed, step by step, sharing meals with Greta and the others, forming bonds that eased the ache in his heart. Meanwhile, Trevor Belmont and Sypha Belnades were far from idle. After leaving Alucard, they had journeyed as a duo, doing what they did best, hunting what monsters remained and stamping out sparks of new dangers. They became heroes in village after village, albeit weary ones. Over 6 tense weeks, they kept catching wind of disturbing news. Scattered cults and deranged followers of Dracula were trying to bring their dark lord back from the dead. It seemed unbelievable, but Dracula's legend had already grown larger than life. Some humans, missing the sense of order or desperate for power, started worshipping him even after his defeat. Trevor and Sypha crushed these attempts whenever they found them, battling rogue magicians, mad monks, and night creature remnants alike. Each victory left them a bit more battered, a bit more tired. They yearned for rest, but the idea of Dracula's return was too dreadful to ignore. During these travels, they heard whispers of a sinister force behind these resurrection plots, a shadowy entity known only as death, an ancient spirit that fed on mass suffering. This being, it was said, had no form of its own, but wore many faces and manipulated humans and vampires alike to create carnage from which it could feast. Trevor and Sypha took these tales seriously, for they had encountered creatures beyond the ordinary. If true, death itself was a foe like no other, one not even Dracula could truly control, perhaps. Their path eventually led them full circle back to Targoviste, the city where Dracula's war had begun. Much of Targoviste lay in ruins, but a small underground court of survivors persisted, led by a hardened guard captain named Zamfir. She was suspicious of outsiders, but Trevor and Sypha's reputation preceded them, and soon they earned her hesitant trust by helping defend the starving townsfolk from yet another night creature attack. In Targoviste's underground, Trevor discovered relics, strange glowing stones and old weapons, remnants of the royal court's attempt to fight back during the war. Sypha deduced that these items were part of an ancient tool designed to slay creatures of the night. Trevor pocketed these, sensing they might be useful. The very air in Targovist felt thick with foreboding, as if unseen eyes were watching their every move. Their instincts were right. Two vampire figures, a gaunt Englishman named Varney and a hulking warrior named Ratko, had been stalking Trevor and Sypha's journey, seemingly trying to revive Dracula for their own ends. It all came to a head in Targoviste when night fell. Varney and Ratko unleashed an attack on the city's refuge, and in the chaos, the truth was revealed. Varney was no ordinary vampire. In fact, he was a disguise. When cornered, Varney's form melted and twisted into the terrifying true visage of death, the Grim Reaper itself. This skeletal apparition had been pulling strings all along, influencing the prior cults and even manipulating Saint-Germain, a once benevolent alchemist the heroes knew, into helping enact a plan to bring Dracula back in a corrupted form. Saint-Germain, who had been an ally at Lindenfeld, had lost his moral compass in pursuit of reuniting with a lost loved one. He bargained with death, disguised as an alchemist, for knowledge, and in doing so, he set in motion a ritual to merge Dracula and Lisa's souls into a single body, an unholy fusion called the Rebus, meant to contain incredible power. Now, at Dracula's own castle, with the help of another vampire general named Dragan, this awful ritual was nearing completion. Once Trevor, Sypha, and Zamfir realized the extent of the threat, they raced to Dracula's castle, using a portal mirror Varney had activated to join Saint-Germain. Arriving at the castle that night, Trevor and Sypha were reunited with Alucard amidst utter chaos. The castle was under siege once more, but this time defending it were Alucard, Greta's villagers, and what few fighters could wield a weapon against an invading force of night creatures and mad vampiric followers under Death's command. Alucard fought to protect the people he had taken in, his sword swirling like a beacon of hope as villagers hurried into safer areas. Greta coordinated defenses with a natural leader's skill. In the castle's ruined main hall, Saint-Germain, looking disheveled and haunted by regret, had opened an infinite corridor portal with the blood spilled from the battle. From that portal, twisted by alchemy, emerged a monstrosity sewn of male and female human parts, the Rebus vessel. With a thunderclap, the souls of Dracula and Lisa were yanked out of hell itself and thrust into the Rebus's patchwork body. For a moment, Dracula and Lisa lived again, but trapped, confused, and in unimaginable pain within this unnatural form. Their combined presence gave the Rebus immense power. Reality itself warbled around it, and death exulted at the prospect of a maddened Dracula reborn to massacre the world. Our heroes arrived just as this horror unfolded. They realized they had only minutes to stop a catastrophe. Alucard's heart nearly broke to see his parents' souls howling inside the abomination, but he steeled himself. Trevor used the enchanted weapons he found, assembling a sort of cross-shaped blade with a glimmering gem, and with Sypha's help and Saint-Germain's last act of repentance, they disrupted the binding magic. In a flurry of furious combat, Alucard skewered the Rebus with his sword, while Sypha doused it in holy water. Trevor hurled the assembled blade like a lightning bolt straight into the creature's heart. The Rebi let out a ghastly screech as its body began to dissolve, freeing the souls within. Saint-Germain, seeing the ritual fail, sacrificed himself to close the infinite corridor to prevent further tampering. The Rebbe's exploded in a blast of light and dark, and when the smoke cleared, the battle in the hall was over. Dracula and Lisa's souls had been released from their awful imprisonment. Saint-Germain was gone, and the castle fell eerily quiet. But death was still present. Furious at being denied its feast of carnage, the entity manifested fully as a skeletal specter wielding a scythe. Crackling with otherworldly energy, it promised to annihilate everything in revenge. Trevor knew what had to be done. With grim resolve, he told Sypha and Alucard to get everyone out of the castle. Sypha's eyes widened with fear for him, but Trevor gave her a gentle smile and perhaps the softest words he'd ever spoken to her, confessing his love and urging her to live. Sypha's tears glimmered in the chaos as Alucard pulled her away to safety, realizing Trevor intended to face this legendary evil alone. In the highest tower of the castle, beneath a shattered moon, Trevor Belmont engaged in the fight of his life. The ancient being known as Death flung spells of decay and hurled its scythe with the force of a hurricane. Trevor, every muscle burning, dodged by a hair's breadth and retaliated with the morning star whip each strike, causing flashes of pure light as it made contact with Death's dark essence. Still, it wasn't enough. Death was simply too powerful to kill by normal means. Remembering the relics he collected, Trevor swiftly assembled them once more. The strange dagger and magical gem fused with the old cross artifact. This god-forged weapon glowed with a brilliant radiance. As Death lunged for a killing blow, Trevor used the last of his strength to drive the weapon straight into the heart of the Reaper's form. An earth-shattering scream erupted as the elemental spirit of Death began to unravel. In a final act of spite, Death released an explosion of energy meant to take Trevor with it. The tower was engulfed in blinding light as Death was utterly destroyed. Down below, Sypha and Alucard shielded their eyes as a great flash lit up the night sky. Then, silence. The Grim Reaper was gone, and Trevor was nowhere to be seen. In the days that followed, Sypha mourned Trevor deeply. She believed the man she loved had made the ultimate sacrifice to save the world. Heartbroken and exhausted, she found herself staying at Alucard's now thriving refuge, a place being rebuilt into a village from the remains of the castle's annex. Alucard, also grief-stricken at losing another dear friend, threw himself into helping Greta organize the survivors and make a sustainable home for them all. Sypha lent her knowledge and speaker healing arts to this community, even as she privately grieved. In a tender moment, she confided to Alucard that she was carrying Trevor's child, a secret joy and sorrow intermingled. Alucard offered comfort and vowed that this child would grow up in a world safer than the one they had known. Then, just as hope and despair wrestled in Sypha's heart, fate intervened with a gentle hand. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant golds and purples, a lone horse approached the village. Slumped in the saddle was a man, battered and half-conscious, but unmistakably alive. Trevor Belmont. Gasps and cries of astonishment greeted him. Sypha ran to his side, tears of disbelief turning to laughter as she helped him down. Trevor had survived the impossible. By what miracle, you wonder? It turned out that in the final moment, Saint-Germain's infinite corridor key had pulled Trevor into a portal, sparing him from death's explosion. He had tumbled out onto an empty plain miles away, alive but wounded, and spent 2 weeks making his way back. The quiet joy of Trevor and Sypha's embrace under the twilight sky was a reward sweeter than any treasure. All the villagers cheered, and even Alucard, watching from afar, felt a warm tear on his cheek and a genuine smile forming, a rare sight indeed. At long last, there was a true sense of closure and peace. Trevor, recovering with Sypha by his side, made plans for a future free of monster hunting, at least for a time. With a baby on the way, the couple decided to settle for a while, perhaps even right here at the castle-turned-village where their friend Alucard was forging a new life. They playfully joked about naming the place Belmont, much to Alucard's eye-rolling amusement, but secret appreciation. The Belmont legacy and the speaker traditions would live on through their child and through the knowledge Alucard safeguarded. And what of Dracula and Lisa, those tragic lovers who started this tale? In a twist of mercy, the destruction of the Rebus had not banished their souls back to hell, but instead miraculously restored them to life in their human forms. Sometime later, far from Wallachia, a traveler at a roadside inn might have noted an oddly pale man with long dark hair and a strikingly beautiful woman with kind eyes renting a simple room. These two kept to themselves, speaking in low tones of having been given a second chance. It was Dracula and Lisa, now just Vlad and Lisa, ordinary in appearance, freed from the burdens of vengeance and immortality. They chose not to reveal themselves to Alucard or anyone else. After all the pain caused by Dracula's wrath, they thought it best to let their son live without the shadow of his parents. Instead, they planned to wander to find a quiet corner of the world, perhaps a coastal English town called Whitby, Vlad mused, and simply be together. For the first time in ages, Dracula felt at peace, his love by his side, his hatred gone. In their room one night, Lisa rested her head against his chest, listening to a heartbeat that she never thought she'd hear again. Whatever future they had would be built gently, far from castles and crowns, in anonymity and love. So ends the tale of sorrow and hope, of war and peace. Wallachia slowly healed. The scars of the dark rain remained, but grew fainter with each passing season. Fields were replanted, villages rebuilt. People sang songs of the saviors, the Belmont who returned, the speaker mage, and the son of Dracula who fought for humans. The Belmont hold became a repository of learning rather than a secret armory, open to those who would learn how to prevent such nightmares from rising again. And at the edge of a forest, the old castle Dracula stood silently, ivy crawling over its stones. It was no longer a source of terror, but a curiosity, perhaps even a haven under Alucard's watch, as the new community around it thrived. The night, once filled with fear and blood, now was just night again, a time for rest under the watch of moon and stars. And in that gentler darkness, the memory of Lisa's compassion and Dracula's final redemption glimmered, reminding all that even the longest, blackest night can end in a dawn of forgiveness. Our journey through Wallachia's dark nights and brighter dawns draws to a close. You have walked with me through creeping shadows and candlelit halls, and together we've seen that even in the bleakest times, love and courage endure. Now, in this moment, feel the stillness around you. The tale is done, and all the characters, the heroes, the villains, the lost and the found, can finally rest, Allow your mind to settle like the dust in an empty throne room. Take a slow, deep breath, and as you exhale, let go of any lingering tension. The story's end is peaceful. Imagine a soft morning light touching the ruins of Dracula's castle, now filled with wildflowers and the laughter of children. Hear the distant echo of gentle waves if you think of Dracula and Lisa finding solace by the sea. All is well in that world at last. In our world, here with you listening in the dark, all is well too. You are safe, and it's time to let the quiet take over. If your eyes aren't already closed, feel free to close them now. Feel the comfort of your bed or chair supporting you, much like how our friends in the story supported one another through hardship. Your breathing is slow and calm. With each breath out, imagine any stray thoughts or worries drifting away, just like Lenore's ashes in the breeze, or the dark smoke of Dracula's anger finally evaporating. With each breath in, invite tranquility and a lightness of spirit. Tonight, you've heard whispers of an old legend, lovingly retold to bring you comfort. Let those whispers fade now into a soft silence. There's nothing more you need to do, nowhere else you need to be. In this gentle darkness, you may find sleep creeping in, like a friend coming to wrap you in a soft cloak. Embrace it. As you drift off, perhaps you'll dream of moonlit castles and fields of summer flowers where once there was battle. Perhaps you'll simply enjoy a deep, dreamless rest. Whatever comes, know that you are cherished in this peaceful night. Thank you for sharing this time with me and for listening so quietly to the whispers of Wallachia. May your sleep be as restful as a hero's well-earned slumber after a long quest. Sweet dreams and good night.